Welcome to my channel, home to history of the macabre, mysterious, and paranormal. This is no ordinary history channel. You've been warned, it might get weird. Pioneers of the Paranormal, Ed and Lorraine Warren. Welcome to the first in a series of videos that will cover the history of paranormal research and the people who pioneered the field of study. I thought it was only fitting that we begin with some of the most famous paranormal investigators in the world, Ed and Lorraine Warren. They investigated some of the best-known hauntings, many of which were used as inspiration for films such as The Conjuring. Their involvement, however, has not been without controversy. First, let's take a look at how Ed and Lorraine got their start. Edward Warren was born in September 1926 in Bridgeport, Connecticut. A few months later, in January 1927, Lorraine Warren was born in the same town. Ed and Lorraine met as teenagers when Ed was working as an usher at the local movie theater. Lorraine made weekly visits to the theater with her mother, and after he'd had several conversations with Lorraine, Ed offered to walk her home one night. Shortly afterward, she and Ed began dating. Ed joined the Navy at the age of 17 and returned to Connecticut for a 30-day leave after his ship sank. It was during this period that he and Lorraine were married. Following the end of World War II, Ed returned home and he and Lorraine had a child together, Judy. For a period of 2 years, Ed attended Perry Art School to learn painting, but became frustrated with the way the lessons were being taught and decided to quit. He also worked for a time as a police officer, just as his father had done. After quitting art school, Ed decided he would continue to pursue art in his own way, by traveling throughout New England selling his paintings. It was during this time that he first began to visit haunted locations, along with Lorraine, who accompanied him on his trips. Ed's interest in the paranormal stemmed from his childhood experience of living in a house he believed to be haunted. From ages 5 through 12, he would hear a closet door open in the middle of the night, footsteps, heavy breathing, feel cold spots, and see a dark mass appear and take the shape of a woman's face. These experiences stuck with him as a young adult and inspired him to take interest in spirits. Lorraine, on the other hand, wasn't much of a believer in the beginning. It was only after visiting haunted locations with Ed that Lorraine became interested in the paranormal herself. Lorraine has reported that she has been able to see people's auras from a very young age, and over the course of the investigations she did with Ed, she discovered that she was a clairvoyant and medium. Early on in their investigations, Ed and Lorraine weren't well known enough to easily get access to the locations that interested them. To get around this, Ed would sit with Lorraine outside of the houses that they'd heard were haunted, and he would sketch the houses. After he finished, Lorraine would take the sketch up to the house and strike up a conversation with the owners, who would often invite her and her husband into the house. Later in their career, people suffering from paranormal afflictions would seek out the help of the Warrens. They claim to have investigated over 10,000 cases. However, this is almost certainly an inflated number. Experts say the real number of cases is probably in the hundreds. In 1952, Ed and Lorraine founded the New England Society for Psychic Research. The organization is made up of a number of professionals, including investigators, doctors, police officers, and more. In the 1980s, the Warrens opened a museum dedicated to the occult, which housed many of the haunted possessions they collected throughout their careers as paranormal investigators. Ed Warren died in August of 2006 at the age of 79. Lorraine is still alive at the age of 91, but has been in deteriorating health over the past few years. Both the museum and the New England Society for Psychic Research are run by their son-in-law, Tony Spira. The Warrens leave behind an interesting legacy, which includes numerous famous cases that were used as inspiration for films, as well as a series of controversies. One of the Warrens' most famous cases was Annabelle, a Raggedy Ann doll that was seemingly moving on its own. The young women who owned the doll brought in mediums to help them understand what was causing the strange occurrences in their apartment. The mediums told them that a young girl named Annabelle Higgins had died on the property prior to the apartments being built, and Annabelle asked for permission to inhabit the doll, which she received. This only escalated the events, which prompted them to call the Warrens for help. Ed and Lorraine believed that the entity they were dealing with was not the spirit of a little girl, but a demon that had been moving the doll around with the intention of receiving the women's attention. An exorcism was performed, and the doll was taken back to Ed and Lorraine's home, where it would eventually be put in the museum inside of a glass case. This case inspired the 2014 film Annabelle, and the 2017 sequel, Annabelle: Creation. Another of the Warrens' cases, The Haunting of the Perron Family, inspired the film The Conjuring. The Warrens were called in to investigate, but were eventually asked to leave because the family believed that their presence was making the paranormal activity worse. The sequel to The Conjuring was based on the Enfield poltergeist case, which the Warrens were barely involved with. According to Guy Leon Playfair, one of the key investigators for the Enfield case, the Warrens invited themselves to this home, investigated for only a day, and faked evidence, such as an interview with Margaret and Janet Hodgson, for financial gain. Both Janet and Margaret claim they have no recollection of giving this interview with Ed Warren. Other less controversial cases, at least in regards to the Warrens' involvement, include the Snedeker's haunting, which was the basis for the film The Haunting in Connecticut, and the Lutz home in Amityville, New York, which was the basis for the Amityville Horror. Lorraine has said that this home was the most disturbing case she ever worked on. However, many experts believe that the Amityville haunting was completely falsified by the Lutz family. Everyone who has lived in the house since the Lutz family moved out has said they've experienced no strange activity whatsoever. In addition to the controversy surrounding cases such as Enfield and Amityville, the credibility of the Warrens has often been called into question. Critics have noted that the Warrens' investigations were severely lacking in scientific methodology and suffered from confirmation bias in several of their cases. Others have mentioned that the Warrens were known to have faked evidence in the interest of making money. While the Warrens did not charge anything more than travel expenses for their investigations, they did make money off of the books and lectures they presented, which could be seen as a motive for faking evidence. Many have said that Lorraine in particular seemed like a very sweet person who would not intentionally dupe anyone. However, she and Ed may have been so optimistic in their pursuit of the paranormal that they ignored rational conclusions in favor of ones that supported their own Catholic beliefs and their desire for paranormal evidence. Regardless of one's opinions on the Warrens, there's no denying that they did have a significant impact on the public perception of the paranormal, both positive and negative. I hope you enjoyed the first episode of Pioneers of the Paranormal. Be sure to check out my other paranormal history videos and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it or learned something new. Until next time, keep it weird.